those things that is one of the most common cited things. We want to learn about that and help you find out what you can do to avoid those issues and to comply with the regulations and help keep employees safe. That's really the goal from hazard communication. So we'll talk about that today. We'll talk about what it is, what it means. HAZCOM, you'll see it listed there on my slide. HAZCOM is the abbreviation for hazard communication, so you'll see that as we go throughout the slide today. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what's required. I'll show you some examples of things that we find as we come around and inspect your facilities and job sites. There's some certain common things that we find. I'll show you some pictures of those. Sources of information you can go to learn how to know about chemical handling and safety and the types of chemicals you have. We'll show you how to find information and some things that you need to do, whether you're the employee or the employer, things that you need to do to keep up with those regulations. So we'll talk through that today. But we'll start out by talking about what is hazard communication. What is that exactly? Well, it's an OSHA regulation, 29 CFR 1910.1200 is where the regulation comes from. And what it pertains to is chemicals and communicating the different hazards involving chemicals in the workplace. And so there's certain requirements that chemical manufacturers have to do as far as labeling and providing information about the chemicals that are out there. And there's also employer requirements that the employers have to do to make sure employees know what they're working around and how to properly store those things. If you think about it, chemicals are something we deal with every day. You think about just going down and filling up your car with gas. Well, you're handling gasoline at the gas pump. And it could be other chemicals in the workplace as well. It could be aerosols or pesticides or paints or anything like that that's in the workplace that you're exposed to, even cleaning supplies. Those are things that we're around on a regular basis. So we need to realize that we could be at risk for things that can affect our health, that can affect our safety. But when it really comes down to it, you're responsible for your own safety, and sometimes you just need to know what the possibilities are, how to protect yourself and what's out there. So that's what hazard communication is all about. It's a right to know what you're working around and a right to understand how to keep yourself safe. It's a right to know what's in your storage cabinets and in your closets and workshops and places where you go, what kind of things are there that you need to watch for. So how do chemicals get into our bodies? How does that happen? Well, the primary route is inhalation. They become airborne. We can breathe those things in. That can have some health effects with certain chemicals that way. There's also ingestion, absorption, or injection. So it could get on your skin and absorb in through your skin into your body. You could accidentally eat it. There could be other things that go on, but we want to learn to prevent those issues with chemicals. So that's what the hazard communication standard is all about. It's a right to know what's in there. It's to help you reduce injuries from chemical exposures and to avoid those issues. So what kind of hazardous chemicals are out there? What might there be? Here's some examples: adhesives, paints, soaps, oils, solvents, disinfectants, acids, and a whole list of other things that could be there. But those are what we want to watch for. So when it comes to chemical hazards, what are some examples of things that could be an issue? One could be incompatible chemicals stored together. Sometimes there are certain things that need to be separated so that they don't have a chemical reaction and become hazardous for health or cause fires or other things like that. One example is bleach and acid. You don't want to have those things stored near each other. Flammables. There's a lot of aerosols and things that we use, spray paints, pesticides, things like that are aerosols. Those things need to be stored in flammable cabinets if they're flammable. Siphoning. That can be a real hazard, obviously. Doing that, if we're not cleaning things out properly and using tools and equipment the right way, there can be chemicals left inside of things that become a hazard. So there might be pumps, there might be hoses, things that need to be cleaned out after use to prevent that. Even missing lids or caps left off of chemicals, like this picture here. You'll see it's missing the cap on there. Well, that could become a real problem. Could cause a fire, could cause other issues in the workplace. So those are some examples of chemical hazards you might encounter. So OSHA has the standard on hazard communication, and since 1994, it's been one of the top 10 OSHA violations every year since its adoption. There's a few things that go along with that we'll look at today, but it's labeling. It's not having chemicals labeled properly, not having safety data sheets, having issues with not training employees, and some ongoing things like that. Well, in 2012, OSHA made some updates, and they went to a globally harmonized system for classification and labeling of chemicals. And the reason they did this is so that there can be some standardization across the world So the United States can have the same type of formats and same setup for communicating the different chemical hazards with all the manufacturers around the world. It standardizes everything. So in 2012, they made some updates, they adopted it, and then they had full implementation of this new system in 2016. So you'll see some new things coming out that we'll talk about here that are helpful for communication there, hazard communication. One of the things that came with is a new terminology. So you've probably heard of the term MSDS. It stands for Material Safety Data Sheet. Well, now it's just simply called an SDS, a safety data sheet. That's part of that new standardization. It means the exact same thing. It's just a new name. So there's a new consistent format to it and standardized sections that people can look at and know, the same thing no matter where they come from or what country they're in. So there's 16 standard sections in these safety data sheets, and these will tell you a lot about how you need to handle chemicals and how to protect yourself and different ways to avoid those issues. So you don't want to throw them away. If you get a safety data sheet, that needs to go into a binder that we'll talk about, and it needs to be in a place where employees can see them and review them so they know about the hazards in the workplace with those chemicals. So you want to make your employees aware of those things, where they're located. You want to train on them for each chemical. These safety data sheets you can get from vendors. So if somebody is a distributor for chemicals and they bring those out, you can ask them to give you a copy of the safety data sheet. A lot of times it'll just come with it already. Or you can go online and you can print those off. You can search for those and find the new current safety data sheet for certain chemicals. But there are 16 sections, and that's what this new format, 16 main sections that talk about things such as, what do you do if it gets on you, how to handle it. Firefighting measures, if there's a fire with a chemical, how to handle that, how to properly store it, how to handle it, different personal protection equipment that you'll need, PPE, how to handle those things and different hazards with the chemicals. You can find all of that in the safety data sheets. So this is just an example of the new format of what they'll look like for the SDS. You can see it's got some ratings on it. It's got ratings that tell you the severity of the flammability or the health issue or the issues that might be there. It's also got some labels and pictures on there that we'll talk about. Those are pictograms, the little the diamonds with the red around them. That indicates the hazards there that we'll talk about. And then it just shows you what the product is, the name of it, and general hazard information with those sections we talked on. So it's good to have a binder. It's good to have a safety data sheet binder centrally located where employees can get to that. And they can refer to that to find a chemical. If they had an issue with one or they wanted to know more about it, they can go and they can find how to handle those chemicals. So one of the key things to that is you want to have a chemical inventory list. So you should have a listing of all the chemicals in your workplace that you use regularly and have those listed out so you can check that off and make sure that you have all the safety data sheets for those chemicals. You want to keep those things up to date. Like I said, there's new ones. Instead of being the MSDS, there's new ones that have come out. And you might want to go through your book and make sure you've got the new current ones in there for the new SDS updates there. So some of the common HAZCOM findings that we see when we see issues out as we go around, I'll show you some pictures here and talk through those of things that can be easily avoided and things that are common. So here we have a spray bottle that's got some kind of bluish liquid in it, and the problem here is there's no label on it. You don't know what it is. Looking at this, we could assume that it's in a cleaning supply area, so it's probably some kind of a cleaning solution. But again, we don't know. So if it's left like that, it's a hazard. It could be something dangerous. It could be something that could cause a fire, something that's bad to breathe. We just don't know. And so that's why we have to have things labeled. That's a common thing that OSHA will look for if they come out to your work site. Here's another example. It's in another spray bottle, but this one has some wording on it. It's got some check boxes of things that you can mark on there. But again, it's going to be out of compliance because we just don't know exactly what it is. Maybe the markings were on there and they rubbed off, and maybe it doesn't have the right label. I'm going to show you an example of a couple different labels that we can put on those that make it a lot better to know what's in there and be in compliance. Here we have a picture of a bunch of chemicals stored together. They're all just thrown together on this cart. And you can see there's some flammables there. There's things that could cause a fire. There's other things that might be bad for your health. There might be things that are incompatible that shouldn't be stored together. So we want to make sure that we segregate things out and store them in the right locations and not just throw them all together where there could be an issue mixing together or having a fire over those things. We see this a lot as well in storage yards. This is a tank, and it's probably some kind of fuel tank, whether it's diesel or gasoline. We just don't know because there's no labels on that tank. There's no placarding. There's nothing to indicate what that is, and so that's another issue with hazard communication. Here we have a mix of things. We have looks like some recycled batteries. It's near some food items. It's near some cold tablets. Wood putty. There's several things there, and you want to have those things separated. Those things shouldn't be stored together. They should be in designated locations and labeled properly. There's some things that have writing on it that we just don't really know exactly what's in there. A lot of times we'll see in workshops these safety data sheet find these folders and binders, and sometimes we'll look at this and it'll be totally covered in dust, and it's an indication that this hasn't been updated or even looked at for a long time. I've often opened up these books and found absolutely nothing in it, just an empty 3-ring binder. And again, if you have that, you need to make sure that you have the current SDS in there, the safety data sheets, that it's updated and current with all your chemicals with the inventory list. So check those things out in your workplace. Make sure you have those available. I really like this picture because it's an indication of what happens in the real world. Sometimes we've got a drink in the workplace, and we're busy doing things, and we'll just set our drink down somewhere. Well, it's right near some window washer fluid. So the question here is that somebody's drink they left behind full of lemon lime Gatorade, or is this window washer fluid? Is it antifreeze? We don't know. We don't really know because of the labeling. So you don't want to leave containers laying around like this that have labels on them or lacking labels or any issues like that. There shouldn't be any confusion. So make sure those things get moved out or labeled properly if they're another container. So here we have a flammable liquid container. It's outside of a flammable cabinet. So if you have 5 gallons or more of flammable fuels or flammable products, those need to be inside of a flammable cabinet. There's also aerosols. There's things right there together that could cause a fire. Here we have some compressed gas cylinders, and oftentimes it's the oxygen and acetylene cylinders that get stored together, which is a real hazardous issue. Those things can cause a real hazard in the workplace and an explosion. So those should be stored separately. Also, cylinders should be chained up. They should be kept from tipping over, and there should be labels on those that indicate what type of gas is in those cylinders. So those are just some common things that we see, some of the regular things that happen to hazard communication in the workplace, things that you might watch for. So as far as an employer goes, what does the employer need to provide? What do they need to do to comply with the hazard communication standard? First part of that is having a written HAZCOM program. There's templates out there that you can get and put those things in place and train your employees on the program of how to store, how to have your SDS updated, how to keep things updated with an inventory list, identifying all those chemicals and listing those things out. Your communication program can help with that, and you can train your employees on that so they know what the expectations are. Make sure you have a labeling system that everybody understands. Make sure it's to compliant. We'll show you some examples of those, of the different types of labels you can use. And as an employer, it's up to you to provide the SDS for all the chemicals in the workplace so employees know how to protect themselves. So make that written HAZCOM program available to employees. Keep everything updated on it. There are templates that you can get if you go to OSHA.gov. You can find a hazard communication template and just plug in your information. There's good examples of that. And even searching online, you can find some other templates for a HAZCOM program. But it's pretty simple to put in, but you just have to take time to do it, and you have to train on it and have those things in place. When it comes to labeling, a few things we want to look at. So here we have a spray bottle, which they've indicated it's vinegar and water, which is good. They wrote on there that it's vinegar and water, but it's actually out of compliance because it doesn't have all the necessary information to know what exactly might be in there. There could be other things. And so we're going to show you some examples of labels. You can create your own, but there's certain bits of information you need to have on there, and there's an easier way to do it by using other labels that are out there. So here's an example of what you might put on there. These are a blank label. You can put on there the chemical name, circle the different types of hazard based on those diagrams, pictures there, the pictograms. And whether it's dangerous or if there's any warning, if there's anything you need to know, or personal protective equipment, you can put all that information on there and rank those hazards as far as health and flammability and reactivity with a scale there. Now, that you can get these on a roll. There's stickers that you can get, and you can Identify these for the type of chemical you have. If you were to put that into a secondary container, like maybe a spray bottle or some kind of bottle of some kind, you could put this on there and indicate exactly what's in there and what the hazards are. So the key you want to know is, what is the chemical, how bad is it, what type of hazards are there, and how do I protect myself from those different hazards. And that labeling system can help you to know that. Here's the other type of label that's out there. This is the one that comes from the manufacturer. This is the new globally harmonized system label that shows you exactly what should be on there. So it will come with a product identifier telling you what kind of product is there, the supplier information telling you about the manufacturer, where those things come from, where to get it, precautionary statements, things that will indicate how you want to store it, how you want to protect yourself, things that you need to do to avoid hazards with those chemicals. It has the hazard pictograms up in the top right, which will show you some examples of those. Signal words, if there's danger or warnings, it will tell you that, and any hazard statement, so you know what you might be getting into when you're handling this chemical. So those are the two different types of labels you might put on there to be in compliance and have that information. Now there's one thing when it comes to labeling. You can use a chemical for immediate use, and you can put it into a secondary container, you can use it, you can empty it, and that's fine. But if you're going to store it, and if something's going to stay in another container, then you do have to have these different types of labels on there so you know what's actually in there. Okay, so on these labels, there's things you might watch for. Danger, warning, if it says those, you definitely want to heed those warnings. You want to read that and make sure that you know how to protect yourself from a health issue with that. Hazard statements. Some examples are that it may cause fire or explosion. It may be a strong oxidizer. The chemical may cause severe skin burns or eye damage. Those are things you want to read and pay attention to in the SDS and the labels. Precautionary statements. It may be that you have to keep it in the original container. You might store it in a cool, well-ventilated space. Do not breathe. Keep away from heat and sparks and open flames. Those are different warnings that they're telling you about, and precautionary statements for the chemical. When it comes to the pictograms, these are the red bordered diamond that can show you what the hazard is. They can describe the hazard just with the picture there. Now, I've had people ask me, is this the target that you take at the gun range to shoot? No, that is not the target. What this indicates is a health hazard. It indicates that something's bad for you that you have to protect yourself from. So these pictograms are all standardized. You'll see these on labels. You'll see these in the SDS sheets. And it's a quick way to just identify what the hazard is in a quick way. So here's a listing of all of the pictograms and the hazards that they represent. You can see there's the health hazard in the top left, and it will tell you specifically what type of health hazard it is. It will also show you a flame if it's flammable, if there's other issues with chemical reactions that can cause flames and fires. Exclamation marks, gas cylinders, corrosion. If something's really corrosive, it will have that label on there for corrosion. Things that are explosive, flames over circles, they indicate an oxidizer. Something bad for the environment, or even skull and crossbones, means there's an acute toxicity issue with this chemical. So those are just a quick way to look at that, and it's consistent all around the world with this new standard for these pictograms and labeling. So what the employer needs to do is you need to train your employees and make sure that they know about the HAZCOM program, how to communicate the hazards, what to look for so they know how to protect themselves. Tell them where it is, where it's located, give them a copy if you need to, train on it, and document that training that you do with them. Tell them where the SDS book is located, how they can get those. Now, a lot of times these are stored electronically. That's okay. They can definitely be on a computer or a local drive, or they can be printed out and put into a book, but they need to be accessible to all of the employees that work in the workplace, and they need to know where they can find those SDS sheets. So they need to know how to handle and store chemicals. That might be a specific training that you hold for a certain chemical, and different ways to handle things. You can do an on-site or on-the-job training with them to show them exactly how to do that and how to read that SDS, how to understand it. Teach them about labeling. Show them how to properly label things, that they don't want secondary containers laying around the site and on the job, that they keep those things labeled correctly. Tell them about sources of information, where to find the SDS, how to look those things up online, and there's also other government agencies out there that can help with chemical information, such as NIOSH. So there's lots of things you can do to train your employees and make sure that they are up to speed on the program and how to protect themselves there. So to summarize, there's even a lot more to it, but today we wanted to cover some of those basics of hazard communication. A lot of times people just don't have a program. They don't have a written out program. There's templates to use. And so you want to make sure you have that program in place. Make sure you update your list of chemicals. Know what's out there and communicate that with each other. Talk with your employees. Know what chemicals are there using that inventory list. Train on the proper handling and storage of chemicals to avoid fires and health issues. Check your SDS books and all your sheets. Make sure you have the new format, the new SDS, that they're up to date and current for all your chemicals. Check your labeling and training. That's really what it's about. There's hazards that go along with chemicals, as we talked about. Sometimes there's things that we just don't realize are bad for our health, and if we don't take the time to understand it or train on it, then sometimes we're putting ourselves at risk. And so that's why it's one of those most cited things that OSHA has out there, because it can affect a lot of employees in the workplace. So with that, that's a summary about the hazard communication. Jason, any questions or comments out there?
Hey folks, if you have any questions, type those into the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to get Brent to answer those right now. Good job, Brent, in covering this important subject. Just as people are putting together their questions, I remember back to when I was in college. I was working for this company, and I had some coworkers have a run-in with this. I worked in a metal fabrication area, and every day we would use cutting oil to lubricate the tooling that we were using, and so at the start of each shift, you would take your little spray bottle like you had in that picture, and go up to a 55-gallon drum and pump out your spray bottle full of cutting oil to be used during your shift. And one of my coworkers couldn't find his spray bottle at the start of the shift, and so he had just finished a 20-ounce Coke bottle, and decided, pardon my coughing, he decided it'd be a great idea to just use that 20-ounce Coke bottle. So he filled it up with cutting oil, took it out to his work area and set it down, and then he went somewhere else. Well, another coworker, his friend, walked by his work area and saw this Coke bottle sitting out there, and he thought he'd play a funny joke on his friend by stealing his Coke and drinking it. And so he grabbed this bottle of cutting oil and a Coke bottle and went behind a corner of pallet of parts and took a big swig of this stuff. And anyway, ended up coughing and gagging and sputtering all over the place, and probably had a bellyache out of it. Luckily, it was just cutting oil and not something that was super hazardous to this guy. But it really highlighted in my mind that as much as we think people will have common sense when it comes to dealing with chemicals, that isn't always going to be the case. Anyway, that was a longer question than I needed, or longer story than I needed to throw in there. But
great example. That's why we have to do the labeling, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm just looking on here. I'm not seeing questions here. Maybe Doug's got questions he wanted to throw out at us.
No, I don't have any questions per se, but that's this is a great reminder. This is an important topic. It's something that takes some work to stay on top of, and so it's really easy to let it slide. So just take this reminder to go take a look at your hazard communication program and make sure you've got it up to date.
Absolutely. Thanks, Doug. Hey, just one other thing that I was thinking about in keeping those safety data sheets up to current. One of the things that we can do to help with that is go and take a look at our chemical storage. And if we've got stuff out there that we haven't used forever, that we're not going to use, that doesn't have a label on it or whatever, let's get rid of it. Then you don't have to have an SDS for it if we don't have that chemical there. So if we've got some downtime where when we're not as busy, go do an inventory of your chemicals and see what we've got there. And get rid of those. Most of the counties in the state will have, or most of the landfills in the state will have a household hazardous waste collection program, and many times they're amenable to allowing you folks to get rid of that stuff there. Just looking if we've got any other questions. I don't see any. Brent, final word.
That's it, everybody. Everybody be safe. Make sure you're watching out for each other with the hazard communication program to help each other out. So thanks, everybody. Have a safe day.